All right, Andrew Campbell, checking in from San Diego. Where is that a chart at home or where are you at?
This is my home base. We're kind of wedged in my home office, and yeah, no, we keep track of this. It's mostly studying our foiling locations, trying to get the wing foils out, and trying to find beaches, and honestly trying to find water excess on our bay here to get good spots where there's eke out like a half knot more breeze because San Diego's so darn light.
Mm. Hey, let's start with that wing foiling. So you're talking about the handheld wings and foils,
Yep.
and it's just the new toys that everybody's throwing into the containers and moving around.
It's amazing how easy they are to throw around. I mean, the whole thing fits in a surfboard bag, and my wife honestly started doing it with Anders Gustafsson's wife. So Emily and Jacqueline started doing it on Lake Pupuki, which is across the bay from where we were in Auckland, and they would charge over there, while we were out racing or training, and jump in for an hour. You can launch basically in as much space as you can fit the board down on. You don't need a big beach or anything, with a big kite. You just pump the wing up and go. So the boys kind of have finally caught up with those guys leading the charge, and we're trying to find all these venues now that are trying to be equivalent with what we had in New Zealand, but it's never windy enough here in San Diego for me. And Jacqueline will just get up and pop and go. And Sheila needs about 8, 9 knots of breeze. I need like 10 or 12 knots of breeze, it feels like, or get a bigger wing. But
Sounds
it's
like
a lot of fun.
you need to go out to Hawaii and hook up with Andrew Lewis, and he means you have enough playground to play on now.
Exactly. Well, we gotta go points north, I think, a little bit, or further south.
So what kind of setup for a first timer? Let's say I want to get into it. What kind of gear do you have, and what would you recommend for a first timer?
Good question. Yeah, well, I think that we have like a 4-meter wing and a 5-meter wing. You're gonna start to gauge in on what you need as your local venue dictates. But honestly, I found it really easy because I don't have a lot of board skills. So it was interesting because Emily, Jacqueline's buddy, was coming at it from a SUP background and a kayaking background, and so she's pretty comfortable on her feet with the board skills. And Jacqueline and I, come at it from a sailing background, so we're very comfortable with the wing, with the angles of attack on the sail and the sailing angles, and so but we aren't comfortable with the board. So I would recommend a pretty big board, a board that kind of matches your weight. So like we have a 100-liter board that seems big once you're up and going, but it's pretty darn nice to be able to stand up and have the board kind of be stable under your feet and then sail from there. Where I think that you get pretty comfortable pretty quick. You can be on a smaller board, and if you're comfortable with your board skills, you can go with a slightly smaller board and be able to be comfortable and take off. But I mean, a decent sized foil goes a long ways too. There's no shame in going big.
So you've got I don't even know where the term came from, but the fuselage, right, is basically what we would call, I don't know who started calling it right that, but you have to have a set of those or in a different set of wings, or can you feel like you can get away with one set and be happy?
It seems like you can get away with one vertical, one fuselage, and one tail, and then we have a couple of the big main foils that go up and down the wind range. So in California we have like a 2,400 square centimeter board or foil that's about as big as the board, it feels like. And then we've got like a 1,550, but there's there's like every iteration in between, and you can go higher aspect and get a higher lift, situation that's a smaller area. And it's amazing how many iterations they're going through, and the whole thing is just developing as fast as the whole foiling world, honestly. And it seems like a pretty cool way to get on the water and get into some pretty cool access. And I don't know, I'm amazed that it hasn't taken off as much in the US, but I think it's definitely coming, especially once people see how easy it is to just get down to the beach, jump in the water, go up to your waist deep and hop up and go. The amount of space that you can walk down a stairway with your equipment, and if it only was the width of the stairway at the bottom, you could probably get in and go. So, we're talking about jumping off somebody's dock and off you go. You don't need a lot of space to rig this thing up, which is probably the coolest thing about the whole program.
Yeah, certainly better than the kite. Well, simpler than the kite pointer, but just a different experience.
It's just simpler, it's a different, it's a different program. And for sure, like, for kiting, I've always looked at that as something that I would want to try, and it was really interesting. But the barriers are clear, the rigging it, getting it organized, and some people are more adventurous than I am. So I really look forward to the chance to now try it, because this is kind of giving me all the confidence in all the other areas. But the barrier to some of these things is space and access. And honestly, that's what we're finding with the Foiling First clinic last week. That's what we're always talking about. In order to figure out ways to improve our sport is to improve access. And this is a perfect example. The wing foil can get down the stairs, or get down your dock, or get down like a little nook of the beach, like those little streets in Newport, like up by Goat Island there. All you need is the width of the street, and you can jump in and go. That kind of access is the kind of thing that we need our sport to grow.
Let's talk a little bit on the Foiling First thing. I mean, now that you've had the experience there with the Skeetas and the Nikas or whatever in Chicago, and in the handheld wing, is the wing actually a better way to get young kids to understand, center of effort and everything else, and how to understand foils before throwing them into these kind of more complex boats?
A really good question. I'm not sure. Like from a developmental standpoint, I am not an expert when it comes to young sailors and how they learn sports. I guarantee you that there will be kids that we can draw out of surfing, that we can draw out of sailing, that will want to go and try wing foiling and try foiling in that aspect, or try sailing in that aspect, I should say. Like my background, coaching at the CISA clinic, coaching at the Olympic level, racing dinghies my whole life, comes at it from a sailboat racing side, driving towards foiling, rather than from a board side driving towards foiling. So the amazing thing is that, the wing foil thing meets in the middle for sure, right? Like it's a cool kind of interchange between two sports, where we can kind of hopefully grab some people over from the water sports side. Likewise, they may be able to grab some of us over from the sailing side, and we can grow both of our sports. But from a young person's perspective, I don't think any of it hurts. We have brought on a couple of young women into our program at the SailGP, CJ Perez and Daniela Meraz, and both of them come from a board sports background, right? Daniela is a amazing kite surfer, and CJ's background is in wasps and open bicks, but she's also an incredible surfer and incredible wing foil talent. And so you see where those basic skills, that comfort level on the water, the ability to learn something completely new and different every time you go sailing, is something that's really necessary as we move forward with this kind of steep learning curve part of our game right now. And that's something that drew us to those two women, specifically because they have an attitude that's wide open to learning new things, and they're not stuck in the rut of one version of our sport. They're learning everything all the time, which is not to say that there aren't good ruts to be in. I love one design dinghy racing. We go sailing with my family on the J22 at the yacht club, in San Diego Yacht Club. Like, slow boats are something I grew up on, and I absolutely love to go racing, no matter what the format. But you have to be able to kind of learn and adapt on the fly in ways that we never really anticipated when I was a kid.
Hey, getting ahead of ourselves. Let me Matt Knighton shared I guess what is the promo clip out of Chicago. So for the benefit of those eventually watching this, let's do a quick share on that one and give it a shot.
So this is our first Saturday of the Foiling First Clinic here in Chicago. We had the Chicago Yacht Club hosting this event with Jackson Park Yacht Club with the Chicago Park District. We've had some really great young sailors come through today, and if they can walk away from this and say, foiling something for me, sailing something I'm really wanting to continue to do and continue to pursue, that's our whole goal. And if we do that, then we're winning.
My goal for today is to learn something new and just to try to improve my sailing skills. All right, can I get on now?
When I was going out, I was pretty nervous, but once I got on the boat, I was like, oh my God, I'm going so fast. It was crazy.
I've never been on a rocket ship, but if I was on one, I feel like that's my speed.
It was so amazing to have our partner Rise come and talk with us.
We use sport as a place and a space to have conversations about racism, about diversity, equity, and inclusion. The program was about identity.
That was really cool. I think it's very important to talk about diversity because when you're competing, you don't really think about like, oh, she has brown hair, I have blonde hair, whatever. You're just focused on what you're trying to do and working as a team.
So rise on three, 1, 2, 3! Rise!
Tiller towards you, and then you're going to start to take off. As soon as you take off, push it back away again slowly.
It's not something that I would have ever thought that I could do on a sailboat. And it was just like, I can't believe I've been able to have this opportunity. I'd love to do it again at some point. I don't know when, but I really want to.
Day 2, hour 2 of foiling for Peter. I mean, the step that he's made even since yesterday is amazing, and you can see the talent of these young sailors. They're ready to go.
Hey, nice done. Looks like you guys had good conditions, yeah?
We had a lot of breeze, which is we thought it was going to be a little hectic, honestly, but it worked out great. The first one we did in Bristol, we didn't have any breeze, and so we kind of had to figure out how we got that foiling experience to these guys. But in Chicago, the breeze showed up, the city showed up. It was sunny, it was warm. We lucked out, but it was so cool, man. Even watching that video, it gives me the chills, man. We had such a great camp. We have such an important thing going right now. I don't know. I'm shouting it to whoever will hear it because I think it's really special. And the young sailors that are involved just come off the water just in complete awe as to what just happened. The boats are super fun. They're super simple. And if they come to it with a basic sailing understanding, they're going to, come see this, and it's going to be something they've never seen before in their life that they may not have even thought they could do. And you heard that, that they didn't expect that they'd be able to do that. And once they did get out in the water and it happened, then they come away with the confidence that they can move forward in our game. And they see themselves in the future of the sport all of a sudden. So that's something that's so inspiring to watch. And I don't know, we just have so much packed into that program. It's really cool.
Yeah. And access to the boats is obviously the biggest thing too. So it's nice that you've got benevolent individuals, planting these boats and, having them there to play with.
That's a huge part of it, and the partnerships that we're making with the yacht clubs, with the other organizations that are involved are key to the whole thing. It's hard to even know where to start the conversation sometimes as to how to start growing the sport again, or how to energize the sport. And we have such a strong core of yacht clubs across the U.S., of sailing organizations, of community sailing organizations that kind of they just need a little trigger, a little switch of ignition to kickstart, access to a lot more people that are ready to go sailing. There's no shortage of people that want to go and access what we know is out there. That everywhere you go, we have such incredible water access in the United States, and we just have to figure out ways to get more people down there. And Chicago is a perfect example of a place that has an incredibly diverse waterfront. Is a huge city. That people, they live on the lakefront in the summertime, and everybody sees it. Everybody, has that feeling, it'd be fun to get out on the water. How do you grab those people and say, hey, sailing is something that everybody can come and do. we just got to figure out how to break that barrier and get people out into boats. And, you know, part of it is knowing that you can do it at all. You know, a young sailor that may grow up in a junior program, you know, may feel intimidated by the access at some point. I know that I feel intimidated by the access sometimes. You know, how do I take my family to go sailing? You know, if I don't own a piece of equipment in Auckland or in Pensacola or in Newport, or now that we're home in San Diego, how do I break through that? And if I feel uncomfortable with that sometimes, I can't even begin to imagine how, you know, a young kid from the south side of Chicago who grew up sailing the Jackson Park Yacht Club, you know, how does that person, you know, move forward in our sport if even, you know, somebody with my background and in the sport of sailing, you know, feels that discomfort sometimes. You know, I don't want that for people. I want to find ways that we can open our clubs up, that we can open our sport up to a huge mass audience of people that are ready to come in and do it.
Yeah, it's all, I think a lot of times the answer is right there in the community sailing center. There's one in every city, and people they don't think to go. They just think it's there for boat rentals and, you know, kind of inner city sailing, but those are the entry points. And I think a lot of times that's been the key missing link, right, is to get all the people that walk through the door of those places and then connect them with, you know, the rest of us who've been doing for a while.
And some of that too is kind of re-energizing those clubs with a new type of sport, right? With a new type of like a new version of the game, you know, and so for lack of a better description, we're kind of modernizing the attitude of those community programs, saying, hey, look, like, you know, these foiling options are real. There's something that you can get in, that you can approach, that are simple enough for anybody to learn. You know, and frankly, a huge part of our program with the Foiling First, you know, organization is coaching coaches, is trying to make, like, every one of us that were on the water this weekend had 2 or 3 local coaches from Chicago with us, you know, driving the chase boats and helping us out. And those guys are observing how we're explaining the foiling game, are observing like and we're all learning at the same time how to coach this sport, right? What are the best practices for getting a kid on the water safely back to and from the dock, you know? So they're part of this process in a massive way, because when we walk away after a clinic like this, the local coaches are the ones who have to pick up the slack and keep moving forward. And so if you don't leave them with some pieces, with some tools to you know, to help young sailors grab this again, then they're going to be left with just boats. And, you know, that's okay. That's often enough for the tenacious young sailor to say, okay, well, I want to do this no matter what. I'm willing to bang my head against the wall and learn something, you know, learn how to ride a bike when nobody's ever ridden a bike before. But if you have a couple of people who know how to ride bikes, then it becomes a much more, you know, accessible learning process.
Yeah, no doubt. All right. So real quick to finish that thought on the coaching, the training side of that one. I remember my first WASP spin. It was like, you know, like most of us, you tend to want to oversteer it like you would through a laser, and just got to stop that habit. Right. And what was kind of the one thing that you found teaching these kids that was the breakthrough kind of tip that helped them stay up?
Yeah, that's a good question. Like almost everybody has that first reaction instinct. When the boat takes off and starts foiling, if you can get the first trim and make the first reaction, and then the boat continues foiling rather than taking off and, you know, immediately augering in, that first reaction is really easily compared to riding a bicycle in a lot of ways. You know, you fight trying to figure out how it's going to work, and then all of a sudden, okay, I understand how this third dimension balance works. And you know, the biggest key for young sailors is that they work really hard, they hike really hard, and they're just going at 65 true or 70 true instead of just cracking off and going to 85 or 90, going to that reaching angle, going a little bit faster. You know, just getting through that mindset. Okay, if I just go a little bit faster, I'll be able to come back up to angle. You know, we see that a lot in all kinds of sailing. You know, if you just come up, heat it up, and get the boat planing, you'll actually be able to sail lower downwind. You know, there's a lot of parallels like that where, okay, if you just commit a little bit harder, you're going to get there, you're going to take off, and then everything's going to be easy. You won't have to work quite as hard for it. So
until you need the tack.
until you until you got to maneuver. But that's for those coaches that we left behind to figure out how to teach them.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, hey, let's switch to SailGP because you're all geared up. Which it's good to see you guys are now second in the rankings after it just seemed like a forever just hovering there, bottom, middle, bad luck, et cetera, et cetera. And so, well, there you are in second. And I guess what's people stop hitting you stop breaking things, and you can finish races and things happen then, huh?
I agree. Well, I don't know. We're one bad break away from being who knows where, but the season started off basically as bad as it possibly could have, right? When we got holed and turned over and the whole thing in Bermuda. And we thought we showed up to that regatta strong enough to be on the podium straight away. And it turned out worst case scenario, which sets you off for, exactly what you're saying. We've been chipping away this whole time. And we've quietly, well, I guess not so quietly, been on the podium, all but one event. So we're quietly kind of chipping away at the leaderboard. And we know that we need, these next two events to just continue to quietly do that. And we'll be in the right place come San Francisco time for that final podium race. It's an interesting series that way. There's a lot of races and there's a decent, number of regattas where consistency pays off in a way that, sometimes you don't expect. I come at it from that college sailing background where you do 18 races in a weekend. And, oftentimes if you can finish fourth in every race, you're going to win your division. And so this kind of feels that way a little bit, with the caveat that at the end of the season, you can't finish fourth in that last race. You have to go out and win that last race. So, we've been, coming at it from the attitude where we push really hard to make sure that we're consistent, that we just take gains in every single race, no matter where we're coming off the starting line. And it's worked out well for us where we've come off, in the podium race in that final race on Sunday, all but one regatta. And honestly, we've been leading in 2 or 3 of those races, I guess 3, and ready to kind of finally take one of these things. And we just, for whatever reason, haven't been able to nail one down. But it's as painful as it is not to win any of these races, any of these regattas. We know that we're one of the strongest teams there, and the other teams are not excited for us to be doing as well as we're doing. So that's the important thing, that we're kind of striking some fear in those guys, that we still have a lot of room for improvement, we think. And as long as that ramps keeps going, then we're going the right direction.
It seems to me, and I know sometimes like the TV production can kind of force some themes, and there's the personalities are starting now to develop. You got kind of Wildman Nathan, and there's a guy who's a bully, but actually I guess Billy Bisson is sort of the first person I guess in that world to say be sacked, right? Yeah, so it's finally somebody, new face there.
I don't know. I'm curious about it. And I was surprised to see that, honestly, because I thought that French team was doing pretty well. They were showing a pretty consistent, I don't know, they weren't quite at the same level we were. They were showing similar consistency, 1 or 2 spots behind us, but we're nonetheless an impressively consistent team through the season so far. So I was surprised to see that. I think that, those guys were probably frustrated they hadn't been able to break out and get on the podium, to break out and win a couple regattas. And that's what they're looking for. So if they think somebody new needs to come in and do it, then so be it. We're curious to see how those guys go, because those wild cards have a lot to learn in the process that we've already been in for this whole season. And, we feel like we were on the back foot at the first regatta. I can only imagine with 3 regattas to go, how you're going to feel. But, those guys are going to be excited to get in and race hard with a new driver on board. And I don't know, it's really, like you say, the broadcast guys make a lot out of the helmsman and their personalities, but I guarantee you there's just so many personalities on the rest of the boat that are forcing the issue half the time. So it's really interesting to be kind of under the radar.
Yeah. Well, so I imagine then the strategy then would be, again, take the first first event in Bermuda is just to stay away from the French for no matter what you can do is just to not be anywhere near them on the starting
Well,
line.
you say that, but I mean, we got run into by arguably the most experienced sailor in the fleet. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
You're just trying to stay away from everybody, honestly, and make sure you get around the first couple, 3 races clean. And that's the whole goal, is to stay out of trouble 9 times out of 10. If you can get off the line, out front, that makes things a lot easier. We saw that in Saint-Tropez, the first day in Saint-Tropez, we got our nose clean, and the fray behind you is just insane to watch. You just don't want to be in it. So that goes for all boat racing. It's good advice for all young boat racers out there. You start first and stay out of the fray.
Yeah. So I did this. One thing has really been nagging at me though, since the first event, everybody went 3 up. And so this, and before I've always had a strong opinion on it, but I know what I'm talking about in this regard with the whole point of the 3 up, and everybody's got the female, on the team learning, Danielle, and so so more on the technical side.
Yeah.
Is there a very specific crew weight that you need to get to in order to get the boat to foil? And is that the cap that doesn't allow you to bring on the female at least in a grinding role in some way?
It's a really good question. Yeah, that's a really good question. And that happens at the SailGP level. That doesn't happen on the team level.
Right.
So they dictate how many people are on board, and yeah, I'm not sure exactly how it's going to work out, but I can guarantee you we're going to have the girls on board for some of these next couple regattas. And it has to be the case, because otherwise you get so few hours of sailing during the weekend. We get such a short practice period, and then the racing is so intense and short that you barely get any time as it is, much less some of the girls who have been brought in, just for this season. So I guarantee it that the girls will be on board moving forward, and they're going to figure out a way, weight-wise and otherwise, to make sure that we're all sorted. It's really important to get those guys on board and understanding how the boat works in a racing environment. It's all well and good to be on during practice, but to see how the team functions, it's a huge priority for SailGP, and they just need to make it happen. And I think we're going to. The 3 up, the idea is that in those conditions where it's marginally light to fly a hull, you need the boat to be light. And the difference when you have 3, 4, 5, or 6 people on board, because all the drop numbers, when the trim of the boat changes significantly as you have people, forward in the boat and back in the boat. And so having 3 people on board allows that hull fly to happen in lighter air. And then it seems like if the boat can fly a hull, it can pop up and go, because the foils are really nice and big. And so oftentimes those 3 up conditions are, it's interesting, because we'll sail with 5 during the practice part of the session, and then all of a sudden they'll come over the radio and say, okay, we're going to sail with 3 because it's marginal here, and there are big holes, and some of the teams are sailing with 5 and not being able to pop a hull. And so as soon as you get the 2 guys off, here comes the hull fly, and the boat's flying all of a sudden. And so then you're having to foil around the racetrack with 3 guys, which is pretty hectic. The twist function in the wing works more efficiently than the boats did in Bermuda, and more efficiently than the boats did last season. So, essentially, as long as you can grind the wing up to center, the twist function is running most of the wing trim, and you don't have to grind a lot. All the teams have kind of been debating about how the best configuration is with the 3 sailors on board. We had a full-time flight controller on for the first couple regattas. And then the last regatta, I was on kind of more in a grinders and tacticians spot and not doing any flight control, or very little. And so, we're trying to figure out how we're doing all these configurations as we go. But, the idea is to be as light as we can in those light air races. And then as soon as the boat's up and foiling, you need all the weight. So, I'm always kind of an advocate for having as many people on board as we can, because, the riding moment makes the boats perform better. It's just a question of getting the boat out of the water the first time.
Yeah.
But like you say, moving forward, it's going to be you're going to see all the girls on board, no doubt, which is a really good thing. And they're definitely long-term plans, making sure that we get as many women involved in the SailGP process as possible. That's a really strong priority from SailGP, and we're taking it as seriously as anything.
That's good. Yeah, I remember the first time seeing Rome sort of half leaning over into the forward copper, sort of half grinding. It was like, what? That's nuts, man. Just put a grinder there, a nice lightweight grinder, and take that away. But anyway, that's good. I'm sure it's all been sorted, and you guys have the strong ace in Daniela. As seems like she'd be a great at.
Yeah, Daniela she did the Europeans, I think, last regatta, and then she's got another kiting event this weekend coming up in Cagliari. So CJ is going to come join us in Cadiz, which we're excited about. It's the first time she'll be on tour with us, so cool. We're excited to have her.
Awesome. All right, so I was going to tee up the one. There was a one start where Robinson, the Spaniards, kind of came in hot at the starboard end, but I couldn't get it queued up, but maybe I can add it into this file later. But so explain to me a little bit. I'd be curious about the starts, because it seems like the general chaos of just kind of trying to position within a minute or whatever. It seems like it'd be easier to get where you want to, but it probably is not so. Huh?
It's hard. It's only hard because you have the starting box is closed around the starting line, and so the geometry of the race course is such where the start line is basically on the right hand boundary, and Melanie and Ian and the guys at race management, they open up a box beyond the right hand boundary to allow us to sail in for the pre-start, but it's a pretty limited size, and oftentimes it's limited by like the town or the beach or whatever's there, or the crowd. And so we're having to often push into that box on the port part of the approach late. And I think quite often on the broadcast, you guys don't see it. I'd imagine it's like a hockey broadcast. You never see any line changes in the hockey, broadcast, right? But that the action's happening somewhere. Yeah. And same thing with us. I think that the broadcast cuts to us when we're kind of on that final tack on the starboard, and you're like, okay, well, how did they get there? But oftentimes the race starts, a minute or two prior, when that first approach on port, where you are in the lineup, where you are with your relative time to kill after the tack, all that stuff's pretty important. And where you tack, based on that starboard tack ley line to the windward end, can dictate how far up the line you end up starting. And what you have seen is that Phil has this knack to get caught out above that starboard ley line and want to come in with pace. And 5 times out of 10, maybe 6 times out of 10, there's an open spot for him to blast through, right? And I don't know, 1 or 2 times out of 10, he gets shut out, and oftentimes not shut out, and then second row, but like shut out at the committee boat end. And so, he's gotten himself into trouble a couple times, but that's just a strategy that has more risk and can have more reward, because half the time he comes ripping in there and blasts through a gap that nobody saw was available, and he's at 4 or 5 knots more boat speed at the gun, and that's something that works for them. So I don't know. I don't personally see it as a consistent part of that consistent approach that I think we need to have. But, come those final races, come those 3-up races, that's more of the approach, right? I think that's probably a good one for the casual fan at home to watch the difference between how kind of chaotic and early and close to the line the fleet needs to be in the boats, in the starts with 8 boats. And then you look at that final race, at the podium race, and you almost do a Vanderbilt like an out and back at full pace when you're sailing with only 3 boats in line, because there's plenty of space. The box all of a sudden seems really big. The starting line's plenty big, and so you can just rip out and rip back, where you can't really do that when there's more boats in the line. So there's a subtle shift in our starting strategy, come podium racing, that I think's pretty clear to see from the broadcast.
Yeah, a little more open space to let it run. Yeah, that makes sense. So when you So you divide the line, in those kind of chaos starts. Obviously, we talk about the weather end. It's a shotgun approach. You got to hope the hole is there. And in the middle, how do you exit out of the chaos there? Is it sometimes luck, or is it just having that one click of speed to sort of get your nose out a little more?
Yeah, no, for sure. The boat speed is king, right? Like if you, with these boats especially, and with the high speed boards especially, you almost don't get to full speed by the time you get to the reach mark. You're not cavitating by the time you get to the reach mark. So that means you're accelerating from the start line all the way to Mark 1. And so if you start the acceleration process 1 knot or a half knot faster than somebody else, you're going to get to Mark 1 still a half knot faster than that boat, because both boats are accelerating at the same rate, and you're just a half knot faster on that acceleration curve the whole time. You often never meet that full speed, terminal cavitation speed. So it's unbelievably important to be a click faster at the gun, because it never goes away until you bear away and get going downwind. So that's kind of something that is unique to these boats, right? In standard boat racing, upwind starts, there's a limit to your boat speed. You're not going to be able to go faster and faster and faster until the first tack. So, these boats have definitely changed our mentality on making boat speed a priority. So if you can pop, or if you can blast through a gap that's there, you're blasting through that gap at like 4 knots more boat speed, or more, or 5. And those boats get to the first mark, a length ahead or 2 lengths ahead, because they've been accelerating over the past 500 meters, like the whole time faster.
So if you're also there's got to be somewhat of a defensive play there too, to not let somebody, if you see them, almost getting that opportunity, to not let them do it. If you're, let's say, the lure.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Anytime you can stick it to somebody else and not hurt your chances, you're going to do it, because that guy will never be seen again. If you do it well.
Yeah.
And same thing with us. We're looking for ways to stay out of the grasp of the guys to leeward, and you don't want to be slow in those pre-starts.
All right, final one then on the starts, the leeward end, left end. It never seems. I mean, you're eventually gonna get rolled, or is there any benefit to the leeward end?
Yeah, well, it's interesting that in certain conditions it works really well, and I think the breezier it gets, the more likely it is that the leeward end works, because that's a tighter angle from down there. In those breezy conditions, the boat from the windward end has to go all the way around to the front of the bow of that guy at the leeward end, right? Where, you can round Mark 1, almost clear astern of a boat and get down to angle, and you're still in clear air. So you have to go a long ways past a guy up the range in breezier conditions. So you often find that the leeward end is pretty powerful up the breeze range. And so that kind of changes the strategy, but there can be a hole down there that a guy can punch through as well. If the whole fleet has moved up the line, and you can take off and go through the group to leeward, that's just as viable an option sometimes. And but I think that's the kind of mentality that a little more powerful as it gets breezier to be down there. But likewise, it's hard to roll boats. If the boat's going the same speed as you, it takes a long time to get around the front of them.
Oh, cool. All right. So now we're all smarter on how to start a SailGP race. That's good.
I think it goes down. It goes down to it trickles down easy, because the Marsham 32 fleet uses a lot of the same tactics.
Yeah.
And those guys are doing a lot of the same things. I think that there are a lot of lessons to be kind of learned from that group and how they do it, because they got more boats oftentimes than we do. The GC 32 is the same way. So there's a little niche of our game that's playing the same kind of version that we are, and I think it's pretty cool.
Cool. The one other question I had was just like on the boundary penalties. You got the lights, you got the comms, you got everything. How is it possible that people keep picking up these boundary penalties?
Yeah. So I don't know. There's a couple of ways, right? One, sometimes the computer system isn't working perfectly, and so you'll see a team go over boundary kind of accidentally. Two, there are 1,000 reasons why you want to push the boundary, right? The only way to get leverage is to sail a little bit further than the other boat sometimes. And so you will see boats that push that boundary intentionally, come back in and then have to take a boundary penalty, but end up in a different place in the ladder rung, which is interesting. I don't think it's a winning move to push the boundary and come back and pay the penalty. It ends up, kind of a net loss most often, but there are times when you see boats push the boundary pretty hard. The comms are often from, either the wing trimmer or from the tactician. However, the teams have it divided up. On our boat, like, my role is to keep those guys organized with the geometry of the box, with the telemetry coming off of the racing software. So that's my job, is to help keep those guys from going over boundaries and make sure we're going the right way. So my countdown is to remind CJ when he should get out and start setting up. And then this is the other kind of key to these boundary penalties, is when the helmsman drops the board or says board down, it goes down and it has to get onto the lock before we can maneuver. In Bermuda, when we set our boat up at Oracle, we had big enough rams that you could power the board down. And if it didn't get down to full immersion, you could still tack and sail on the new board. It would just be with a reduced immersion, which wasn't ideal because it reduced your ride height and all the other reasons. But you could finish the maneuver and sail. Where the Kiwis during the regatta in Bermuda had rams that couldn't support the hull if you tacked onto it. So the board went down, it went onto a lock, and then they maneuvered. So they had to wait for the lock. And that's what we do now. We have to make sure the board gets down onto lock before you start the turn. Otherwise, you come out of the turn and the board will start coming back up. And then you have to go H1, right, with one hull in, let the board fall down, click on the lock, and then you can take off again. So there's a huge loss if you tack without the board being on the lock. And often the tack without the board being on lock is worse than the boundary penalty. And so you drop the board, you wait for the lock, you turn the boat. Okay, we went over the boundary, we'll pay that penalty and we'll still be foiling. Where the guy who just turned before boundary came, didn't get on the lock, he went H1, he's still, sailing off to leeward, trying to get his board on the lock and before he can take off. So that's one of the kind of key factors of the game that's not super obvious to the
not at all
fan at home, right? That every time you maneuver, jibe and tack, you're waiting for that board to get down and click on the lock. And you'll oftentimes hear somebody on board, and that's my job, because I'm sitting, we'll send CJ and our grinder, our front grinder out, either Alex or Cooper, down to get on the new board. And so I have a clear view of the new board going down. And so I'll start the call. I'll say, I'll call a cadence about how fast the board's going down, because then Rome can adjust how fast or how negative that board is being dropped. And it makes sure it gets on the lock. And then Jimmy knows when I call on lock that he can rip into the turn, and not until then.
Cool.
So
yeah, we don't hear any of that because the commentators talk too much. So otherwise,
I hear that. I'm gonna lean on those guys a little bit. It's interesting that you say that, because a lot of people give me that feedback, and I think those guys do a really good job. At the same time, for lack of a better comparison, when you go to a NASCAR race, and we went to one with Roger Penske's team last go around with American Magic. The NASCAR fans go and sit in the crowd and they listen to their team radio. They listen to their pit team, to their drivers, and to their spotters. They don't care about what the whole race commentary is, or maybe they have that in the other ear, but on like a low volume. All they want to know is what their team's doing and how they're strategizing and how they're going, and what their dramas and issues are. So I think there's room for SailGP to have a feed that you want to watch with your team, and you're just listening to the comms on board your boat. And maybe you can turn the volume up and down on the live feed if you want, if the boat's not going that well or whatever. But
yeah,
it's interesting to hear that, because like when I watch NASCAR on TV, I find it a little hard to watch sometimes because there's so much going on. There's so many cars, you can't follow them. When you go to the race, you're like in the pit with the guys because you're listening to their comms and your team the whole time. And the drama just ramps up in a massive way because you kind of live and die by what your team is doing. And I can see why NASCAR fans love it, but I didn't know that was the case until I went to the race and actually got dragged into it. So I think there's room for it in our what we're doing. And it's interesting that you say it. So I'm going to push your feedback up the food chain.
Yeah, I think there's key points. Obviously, there's that first 30 seconds off the start or whatever, when there is a lot of chatter on the boats. And that's when you want to, I mean, I feel like, yeah, for whatever it's worth, they kind of overtalk points of the race where you really want to listen in. And definitely to your point, I mean, that was one of my best experiences covering the Cup in San Francisco. Once boats would leave you to pedal down to Marina Green, sit in the stadium seats that they had there, and put the straight audio feed from one of the boats. You can only choose one, and to have the jumbotron and a beer in the hand and the team in your ear was like, yeah, it was cool. It was the best way to do it. Yeah.
Well, it points out some of those subtleties, like you're saying, like why the heck did they go over boundary there? Oh, okay. They waited for the board to get unlocked and they still made the turn work. So there are definitely subtleties to what we're doing that don't always make sense if you're not listening in. I hope.
Awesome. Yeah.
We do some dumb things too. Let me tell you. But
awesome. All right. So I promised to keep this relatively short. So we'll, you got things to do. You've got a trip coming up and you got to go to Spain, but what's a real quick and dirty on the America's Cup? There was a note that went around yesterday from the American Magic team saying they're moving on from New York Yacht Club but they're still proceeding as is. What's your hope with the Cup? You want to be back in, and what do you think might happen?
Yeah, nobody knows what's going to happen. Nope. Yeah, even the insiders don't know what's going to happen. I don't think, Dave. I'm excited. I think that there's a lot still to be learned about this America's Cup class, and the sailors that were involved last time, have a lot of knowledge that we know we can move forward with. I'm really excited to continue to pursue the relationship with American Magic. I think that that's as strong a program as there is out there, frankly. The team's kind of waiting in the wings and waiting for that venue to get announced before we can kind of really push forward and make a strong go at this. So there's a lot of things that are kind of moving and shaking in the background that are exciting. And the team is slowly stepping down the racetrack, in the right directions already. So, we need more information about whether there's going to be a regatta, where the regatta is going to be before we can kind of fully commit to opening the squad up and hiring a bunch of guys and getting right into it. So I'm excited about it. I'm quietly kind of, waiting for those negotiations to start up again, but I'm as ready as anybody for another run with American Magic, frankly.
Do you find it kind of amazing that all these incredible assets are just wrapped in plastic, like just sitting there collecting dust? It's a lot like a car, you got to go down and run it every once in a while and, turn the oil or whatever.
Way harder than a car to run it every once in a while, but yeah, exactly right. It's frustrating to have all the equipment down there and ready to go and not have the season starting up again. I don't know. Jimmy described it last weekend when we had that similar question in Chicago. The SailGP is a really great, opportunity for all of us to have a regular season, at the highest level of our sport here. The America's Cup is going to be the pinnacle of our game. And it has this lull that we just have to get over the hump and get into, the foot dragging and the hand wringing about where this event's going to be and how it's going to look. It takes away from what we want to be going and doing, which is getting these boats on the water, getting into the development process, like the nitty gritty of this game, pushing the game forward. It really does. The sport, depends on the America's Cup, for lack of a better word, to push it forward and to drag it forward. And, the sailors that are involved with it know the responsibility that we have to do that. We want to go and push as hard as we can all the time. So I don't know, we feel lucky to be able to be going and doing this. In the meantime, it keeps us distracted from the mayhem of that political, world that the America's Cup can be. while the yacht clubs here and there, they are what they are, the core of these teams at the end of the day are sailors, and we're pushing forward to get on the water racing whenever we can. We just need the cards to kind of fall in the right spot. So, we had a really great relationship with New York Yacht Club last time. They're an incredible institution in our sport that are really, really important players in what our sport does. And so, I think we're all really thankful for how that relationship worked and how it moved forward. But, every team's got a bit of a different perspective on how we're going to play the game. And I think we've got a couple of, steadfast supporters in Hap Fouth and Doug DeVos, who are going to, help this team go forward and win. And, the New York Yacht Club is going to push forward in their own way.
Yeah. Hey, just brings another club to the table. It's all good.
Yeah. It's not a zero-sum game in any of this stuff, which is really cool.
All right. Cool. All right. Last question. I know there's a Masters regatta coming up that your dad's sailing in, but you must be inching closer to are you able to crew with him yet in this Masters thing? Or what?
I don't know. I hope not. I don't know. I would love to go and race with my dad anytime. So we have the Masters and the Lipton Cup happening at San Diego at the end of the month here. Then the J105s, this is kind of our big invitational part of the year. It's a really fun couple regattas and really fun couple weeks here because a lot of great sailors come through and see the best of San Diego in October. I don't think there's any better time to be here racing, honestly. So I'm excited to go cheer those guys on. And I think I'll wait until my gray hair fills in before I work.
I can't remember what the minimum age is. It 40 or 45 to crew? I remember anyway. You're not there yet.
No.
All right, cool. All right, thanks for your time. Appreciate it. It's always great to catch up.
Thank you.
I know Jimmy was supposed to join us, but we'll let Jimmy go. And it's good to have you one-on-one.
No, he's keen. He's keen to come and join us at some point. But he sends his best. We're going to push hard these next couple regattas. And no, I appreciate you giving us the opportunity to talk about the foiling first thing. It's just such an important part of our process. And Jimmy would say that, like the responsibility to start these conversations about how to push the sport to grow in areas where we haven't had it, that falls on us. And as professionals in the sport, we can't just go boat racing for boat racing's sake. We have to figure out ways that we can help grow this game and help grow the audience for this sport. So I don't know, we're taking that pretty seriously, and it's as good an opportunity as we've ever had to kind of shout it from the rooftops and do our best there. So we're taking that on. Awesome. Well, so from the Sailing World side, I hope to someday do the same with the adults, because it's no fun. It's no fair the kids get to go foiling first, and at some point the old timers like us have to. We need an adult camp as well. So we'll get you in the foiling second program, Dave. Yep. We'll get you all sorted. All right, Andrew, have a great one, and good luck in Spain. We'll be rooting for you. We'll have you in the year. Sounds good. All right. Cheers.